let's sew the skirt yoke. Now we already established that we've got two different yokes, okay? You've got the one with the gathers and you've got the yoke without the gathers at the waistline. And of course, when you have got the non-gathered version, you don't need to insert gather threads in the top of the yoke. And if you do, you definitely have to do that. Okay, so then we're going to put the skirt on the bottom. And of course, the skirt will be gathered no matter what you do. And you want to make sure that you have enough fabric for the skirt. I can't emphasize this enough. You do want loads, otherwise it looks rather flat. Keep to the measurements I give you, or go all out from selvage to selvage and cut 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces for your skirt. And to make life easier for yourself, get yourself one of those and gather with that. Most of you that make lots of dresses have that anyway. It's a gather foot. It's brilliant, and I just want to repeat that on my big dress that I did there. I put it on 1 here, and I put it on just under the 21, and it gathered it to the perfect width that I needed. One thing I want to say about gathering dupion silk, when you gather it along the selvage, it's well easier than doing it across. Okay, when it's across, it is all like bumpy. So make sure that your gather threads are 2. In fact, I have seen people try it with 1 gather thread. It will not work. You need 2. You need them spread out, and then it will work. But I'll show you exactly how. Once you've done all this and you've attached the skirt, you can then decide whether you want to put a ribbon over it, or you just top stitch it like I've done here, or indeed if you want to put some pretty lace on. Right, so let's work the skirt. I've already interlined my pieces here, so that means that I've put a separate piece of fabric underneath it, the same as I did with the bodice. And you're looking here at my back pieces, and had I not interlined them like I've done here, so I naturally have 2 layers, I would have to iron on interfacing in this area here to stabilize the center back so that I can put in my buttonholes, right? I don't have to do that obviously because it already is quite thick with 2 layers of fabric. There's no need to additionally put on any interfacing, but if I did, I would again omit the seam allowances both at the waist and also where I attach the skirt. I've done the same on the front piece here. It's interlined. Number 1, nothing will show through. Number 2, it gives more stability. If this was a cotton print, I wouldn't do any of that. I just simply would iron on the interfacing to the center back. And because it's quite thick with all those layers, I am serging the sides of all the pieces because I reckon that's just sensible to do. Really, I don't want it to be too thick in one direction, either the center front or the center back. So if in doubt, if your fabric is too thick, to just serge the seams together, which is what I say in the written instructions, then just do it separately. And I'm doing one after the other here, and then also you might want to give those a good press afterwards because the serging often pulls the fabric together, so you could do that. And then we're closing the side seams. I can remove my pins now, I don't need them anymore. And because that side seam is not on the straight grain, it might well be that through the serging one bit has stretched a bit more than the other, so you make sure that they're the same length. If you cut it correctly, they should be, so you just stretch that a little bit to fit. And I'm doing that on this side here. Watch closely. I put it on and I'm going, oh, hang on a minute. And now I'm closing those side seams. 1 centimeter seam allowance as always. Stitch length is always the same, really, is that 2.5. You turn your machine on unless it's mechanical and it will be on the right stitch already for you. pop the next one in straight under. I think that's a very good habit to get into so that you don't waste thread. If you are making your dress with the gathered edge at the top, you would put the gather threads in now as well, and you would start them on the fold line that we've got there. So now my yoke is ready and I've got my skirt ready. So both of these have to be now put together. So let's have a quick look here at the difference. Mine has only got 2 seams. If you have 4 seams, it's really vital that the skirt does not have a seam on the center front. That's absolutely vital. Please watch out there and don't accidentally do that. Make sure that the seam doesn't sit there and it sits in between halfway. So let's get on with mine now. And the first thing I'm going to do is to secure the center back. So you want to overlap both pieces exactly the same. And then I'm going to snip my center front as well. And then I can put on the center back to the start of my gather threads, and I'm doing the center front here, and that was of course much more difficult. Please line up your center back with the start of the gather threads and not the center front. It's just way easier. I got it done okay anyway, but I mean that might make it a little bit flat at the top, so that was an oversight of mine. Put the side seams on top of each other. Here's the center back, which should be the center front, of course. And then I can start to gather this whole lot in to fit where I've got my pins, and very likely you're going to remove the pin again from the side seams because it's easier to go over there. You don't want these threads to rip at all. That's, you know, that would not be fun, would it? So this always takes a long time to just move it, but I have to tell you that it's way easier when you have cut out your skirt in silk along the selvage. The gathers seem to sit together just perfectly, and they seem to be not quite as perfect and in unison when you do it across the fabric. So it's up to you what you want to do for your skirt, but you can see how beautiful they sit, and I don't even need to do anything to them. If you have cut your skirt in silk and you've gone from selvage to selvage, you will have to slightly pull on the skirt so that the pleats sit really well. So you just give that a little bit of a tug. I do just the one side to the center front, and then I pull on the other side to meet it, so that I don't pull just from one side. That wouldn't make sense. And to secure your threads, you just wrap them round a needle vertical to the seam in a figure of 8. That's basically it. It's very simple. And then I'm going to fan them out so they fit. Pin them in. Super simple, really. But it does take time. I mean, I'm not saying that this doesn't take time. And like I said earlier, where I used a 4 meters 80, I used gather foot and it came out the perfect length, which is complete fluke. But I would try that because it's no fun doing that. And here you can see that tiny little bit where it's not gathered in the middle because I put the beginning of the gather threads on instead of starting the center back on that. And then when you sew it on, you sew exactly in the center of your 2 gather threads. And the other thing is that you can now divvy up your gathers a little bit more by using a pin. So don't worry if it's not perfect before you go to the sewing machine. It's so easy to see when you're sitting at the sewing machine. Seriously, you'll just go, oh, that's not right. And you move over the gathers a little bit here and there. As long as you have each panel with the right amount of gathers, that's fine. Just pop over to the sewing machine and do it. Once you've sewn it all in, you want to go over and make absolutely sure that you haven't sewn any pleats in. Unpicking is never a nice thing. And now I can serge this all the way around, cut off a little bit so that I get a nice smooth edge and make absolutely sure it's flat underneath, so you don't accidentally have the yoke rising up underneath and you cut into it, because then you have to, start over. That's not good. So all the way around. And next you want to give this a jolly good press as well, so I get a really nice pronounced edge, and then you can top stitch it. You could also put a ribbon on there, anything goes. And as you see in a minute, I decided to put some lace on it. Just make sure that this is nice and rounded. And there we go. Looks absolutely beautiful. So at this point, I can also lift out my gather threads. And once that is done, I start my top stitching. Now in my case, I think even the top stitching wouldn't have been enough to give this a little bit of interest. So I used a little bit of lace here and decided that I was going to put it on by hand and just pin it on a little bit. You don't really need to do that at all. You just make sure that you have enough and then you move the lace around as you go. The pinning really isn't necessary. What I'm doing here is I'm doing a slight back stitch. That's a really good way to sew on your lace. You go over, say, half a centimeter or a little bit less, and then you back stitch just a couple of millimeters or millimeter to hold it in, and then you move your way along there and you make sure that you line up whichever the pattern is. In my case, you can see that the little swirls from the lower edge of my lace come up to the edge of my yoke, and I keep it at that line, and that's it. We are finished with a skirt. As you can see, it turned out absolutely beautifully. Now we can attach the skirt to the bodice. So I'll see you there.